I own you and you do whatever I say. Even if you earn your money, I own you.
Matthew stood near the door, his dark eyes fixed on Lena as if measuring her every movement. "Lock the door," he said, the words sharp and commanding. "No," Lena replied, her voice trembling slightly but firm. Matthew's gaze narrowed. He leaned forward, the air around him tense and oppressive. He had long believed that defiance deserved punishment. "You think you can keep disobeying me in my own house?" he asked, his tone cold and calculated. "This isn't your kingdom," Lena shot back, refusing to let him dominate the space with his presence. "It is when you live off my money," he said, standing tall, arms rigid at his sides. Lena felt the weight of his authority press down on her, as if the walls themselves had sides that only listened to him. "I work too," she said, her voice rising despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "You earn scraps," he spat, his lips curling in a sneer. "I earn authority." Lena shook her head, trying to push back the suffocating sense of inevitability. "Authority doesn't come with a Y chromosome," she said. Her words rang out sharply, defiant in the otherwise still room. Matthew's expression hardened. "Don't get clever with me," he said, his voice a low growl. He was fully aware of the psychological weight he carried, of how every word, every gesture, made her flinch. "I'm tired of being scared of you," Lena whispered, and her voice cracked slightly under the strain. "You're tired of knowing your place," Matthew said, eyes narrowing, a predatory precision in the way he spoke. "My place isn't under your boot," Lena said, her chest rising and falling quickly. The anger and fear intertwined in her voice, a mixture of defiance and desperation. Matthew stepped closer. He was relentless in asserting his dominance, measuring her fear as though it were proof of his control. "Then why are you always on your knees apologizing?" he asked, the question rhetorical and loaded with accusation. "Because you threaten me when I don't," Lena said, the words trembling but honest, an acknowledgement of the constant tension that ruled her life. "I correct you when you forget you're a woman," he said, leaning forward, and his gaze pinned her in place. "Being a woman doesn't mean being owned," she said, her hands clenching at her sides. She could feel the heat of his presence, the threat in his stance. "It means being guided," he countered, and his tone left no room for negotiation. "Guided by your fists?" she asked, her voice sharp, eyes wide. "Guided by consequences," he replied, the words carrying a weight she knew all too well. When he grabbed her arm, she flinched, her heart hammering in her chest. "You grabbed my arm," she cried. "You stumbled because you're weak," he said, his grip firm and unyielding, a demonstration of power rather than malice. "You pushed me," she said, anger and fear mingling. "You resisted," he replied, cold and methodical. "You don't get to challenge a man in his own house without consequences." "You think hurting me makes you powerful?" she demanded, her voice breaking but resolute. "Power doesn't ask permission," he said. "Power without control is just cruelty," she said, defiance flaring despite the fear. "Call it whatever helps you sleep," he said, stepping back just enough to let her breathe but keeping the tension palpable. "I don't sleep anymore," she whispered. She could feel the bruises forming, not just on her body but in her mind. "Because guilt keeps you awake," he said, each word deliberate, designed to wound. "Because I'm scared you'll snap again," she admitted. "You're scared because you keep testing me," he replied, the statement flat, factual, as if he were commenting on the weather rather than the terror he inspired. "I test you because I don't recognize myself anymore," she said, voice cracking under the weight of exhaustion and fear. "That's growth," he said, a twisted justification for the control he wielded. "That's abuse," she said, her voice sharp, defiant, and resolute, even as the reality of her situation pressed down on her. "Abuse is a word invented by weak women who can't handle structure," he said. "You're bleeding me emotionally and physically and calling it structure," she said, anger and fear woven into every word. "I'm shaping you," he said, as if he were molding her into something she did not wish to become. "I'm not clay," she said. "You are when I decide you are," he said, a statement heavy with threat. "You can hurt me, but you can't own my mind," she said, the conviction in her voice ringing clear. "Minds break easier than bones," he said, his eyes dark, unwavering. "Then you'll never have mine," she said, her defiance burning bright even in the shadow of his oppressive presence. We'll see how long that confidence lasts, he said, a grim promise lurking behind his words. One day, I'll leave, she said, the words a fragile hope against the overwhelming weight of his control. One day, you'll beg me not to let you go, he said, his voice a cold certainty. I'd rather bleed than belong to you, she said, the finality in her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Careful, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. Words like that get remembered. Good, she said, her voice steady now, almost calm, despite the fear and pain. Remember this too, I'm not yours.